Hello my friends and welcome back. I got a question for you. Do you think the war in Ukraine really started in 2022? Could there actually be a series of events that led up to it? What is the real purpose of this conflict? In this video I'll take you down memory lane to expose the real roots behind the so-called special military operation. Bear with me. For years after independence, Ukraine debated NATO and EU membership, with plans to join the EU beginning in 2007. This was seen as to boost trade and tourism. Despite 21 rounds of negotiations between 2007 and 2012 for an association agreement, President Yanukovych abruptly suspended preparations on November 21, 2013. This is when it all began. This move was a reversal of his campaign promises of EU integration, which had generated him significant public support. He justified his decision by stating his intention to join Russia's customs union. Have you heard about it? I don't think so. I mean, who would want to join Russia's customs union instead of the EU? However, this decision was met with widespread public outrage, triggering protests that recalled the 2004 Orange Revolution. Initially peaceful, these protests escalated into violence after Yanukovych's administration attempted to suppress them. A brutal police attack on students on November 30th, 2014 galvanized over 1 million people, expanding the protests beyond EU ties to a broader rejection of government repressions. The Maidan in Kyiv transformed into a fortified resistance hub, with protesters arming themselves and establishing self-sufficient systems for security, food and medical care. This was to be called the Revolution of Dignity, and it saw the rise of civic groups and became a powerful symbol against the corruption and authoritarianism. Violence escalated dramatically between February 18th to February 20th, 2014, resulting in 100 protester and 13 police deaths, with police using live rounds against the protesters. On February 21st, so one day later, President Yanukovych signed an agreement for temporary government and early elections, but fled Kyiv that same day. Parliament then removed him from office and installed Arsenii Yatsenyuk as caretaker prime minister. This created an opening for Russia, leading to the annexation of Crimea. Pro-Russian protests erupted in southern and eastern Ukraine, bolstered by Russian agitators. On February 27th, so a week later, unidentified little green men, later revealed to be Russian special forces, facilitated and disputed referendum in Crimea. Despite denials from Putin, these forces helped pro-Russian factions raise Russian flags and seize government buildings. Under pressure, the Crimean parliament appointed pro-Russian leader Sergei Aksyonov, framing Ukrainian resistance as a coup. And by the 1st of March 2014, Russia had full control of Crimea. When a commando unit led by Russian citizen Igor Kirkin seized Slavyansk in Donetsk Oblast, the Donbas war had begun. The term Donbas is derived from the combination of Don, the river that flows through the area, and Bas, a short term from the word basin. The region historically known for its rich coal mining industry, steel production and heavy manufacturing. Just some of the factors why Russia is after that region. The Ukrainian government launched an anti-terrorist operation to reclaim control over both Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Due to ongoing war in urban areas, both sides have blamed each other for killing innocent people. Since 2014, 13,000 people have been killed, and the dispute is still going on. In addition to direct military engagement, pro-Russian activists and civilians played a significant role in physically blocking Ukrainian military convoys, preventing them from halting the Russian advance. This tactic was not spontaneous. It was a deliberate strategy orchestrated by the Kremlin. Russia has long used the creation of separatist regions in various countries as a tool to destabilize governments and maintain influence over its former Soviet territories. On July 17, 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 was shot down over eastern Ukraine while flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. All 298 people on board were killed. The missile that downed the plane was traced to a Russian army missile system, which was moved into Ukrainian territory and then back to Russia. Russia and its separatist allies obstructed investigations and spread disinformation, blaming Ukraine and Western media. The Russian narrative was inconsistent, leading to conspiracy theories and confusion. Despite evidence showing Russia's involvement, disinformation continued, aiming to disrupt the truth and undermine credibility. The incident highlights Russia's use of disinformation as part of its strategy in conflicts like in Ukraine. Life had to go on in the western part of Ukraine. Petro Poroshenko was elected president of Ukraine in June 2014. He helped Ukraine get through the first phase of the Donbas war. Putin's toes were stepped on real bad when Poroshenko started the process of becoming the EU's friend once again. He was there to finish the job that the last guy couldn't. Poroshenko's domestic policy promoted the Ukrainian language, nationalism, and basically everything else that meant Ukraine's sovereignty. It was clear as day that Russia couldn't be trusted anymore. Between May 2014 and January 2015, Donetsk airport was the site of two major battles. The first began on May 26, 2014, when approximately 200 separatist fighters, including Chechens, seized the airport key facilities. Ukraine responded with a task force and air support, repelling the separatists after a day of intense fighting. Over 50 separatists were killed, with Ukraine reporting no casualties. This victory was among Ukraine's early successes against the separatists. Russia ramped up support for Donbas proxies in July 2014, lobbing rockets across the border like an uninvited neighbor throwing fireworks at your barbecue. The strike Zelenopilya alone wiped out over 30 Ukrainian soldiers and turned 2 battalions worth of equipment into scrap metal. During the summer months of 2014, the number of Russian soldiers in Ukraine swelled to as high as 6,500. These forces, grouped into battalion tactical groups or BTGs, brought their own air defenses and rocket launchers. Both Russians and separatist forces were organized into BTGs of 600 to 800 soldiers each. They aimed to plug the gaps in Donbas front, trying to keep up the illusion that this wasn't a full-scale invasion. In August, Russia and its proxies rolled in with tanks and artillery, sealing the deal. By September the 1st, the airport was in ruins, but Ukrainian forces still didn't let go. The Donetsk airport held great historic value for Ukrainians. At the same time, Ukraine launched a counteroffensive to retake Ilovaisk, a strategically important city seized by the Donetsk People's Army. Ukrainian forces gained a foothold by August the 18th, but Russia intervened on August 24th, sending mechanized forces that by August 27th encircled Ilovaisk, trapping Ukrainian troops. This 2-day siege resulted in heavy casualties: 366 Ukrainians killed, 429 wounded, and 300 captured and tortured. Despite negotiations for a humanitarian corridor suggested by Putin, Ukrainian troops were ambushed during withdrawal on August 29th to 30th, leading to a massacre. Every Ukrainian soldier fighting right now for their land and homes and families, they know this story. Everybody knows this story. I mean, if Putin offers you a humanitarian corridor, you know what to expect. That's exactly what happened. They promised not to attack if Ukrainians withdraw and lay down their arms, and then they attacked, killed everybody. Only 97 Ukrainian soldiers escaped by September the 1st. The devastation prompted the Minsk agreements on September the 5th. A 12-point ceasefire brokered by Ukraine, Russia, and the OSCE. Key terms included an immediate ceasefire, heavy weapons withdrawal, Donbas decentralization, OSCE monitoring, prisoner exchanges, and amnesty. However, violations occurred almost immediately and fighting persisted. On September 29, 2014, separatists backed by Russian troops turned Donetsk airport into a war zone once again, bombarding Ukrainian defenders with artillery before advancing. Using high-rise buildings as makeshift observation towers, they stormed through the city. The airport itself had several key structures. The control towers, the new terminal, and the old terminal all became crucial battlegrounds. By October the 5th, the separatists had seized most of the airport, forcing the Ukrainian troops into the shattered remains of the new terminal. The battle quickly turned into a brutal siege. Separatists pounded the defenders daily, while winter turned the ruins into a freezing nightmare. Despite the harsh conditions, Ukrainian troops held out, earning the legendary nickname Cyborgs of Donetsk Airport. As the siege dragged on, the destruction of the infrastructure and mounting casualties made the battlefield resemble a modern-day Stalingrad. Because of this, people began calling it Little Stalingrad. On November 28th, Russian-backed forces launched a ferocious assault on the old terminal that lasted 3 days. By December 5th, Ukrainian troops had fallen back to the new terminal. This was their last defensible position. Through December, the situation remained largely unchanged. Separatist forces bombarded Ukrainian position in Biski, while defenders held their ground at the new terminal. Separatists launched a major assault on January 10th, leading to the collapse of the air traffic control tower 2 days later. Despite an ultimatum to surrender, Ukrainian forces, still known as cyborgs, refused. Fighting intensified, and a Ukrainian counterattack on January 17th proved insufficient. On January 19th, Russia sent significant reinforcements, including tanks, artillery, and special forces. By January 21st, Russian troops destroyed the remaining Ukrainian positions in the new terminal, killing or wounding over 50 defenders. After 242 days of combat, the airport was reduced to rubble and the battle concluded. This defeat contributed to the Minsk II agreement, but hostilities continued, with the front lines devolving into trench warfare. On February 12, 2015, both parties shook hands and Minsk II was signed. However, this did not end the war, and Russia continued sending its troops to Ukraine. By that time, eastern Ukraine had become one of the most heavily mined areas on Earth. After the signing of the Minsk agreements, frontline activity gradually decreased, with most casualties occurring in 2014 and 2015. According to the UN, from April 14, 2014 to December 31, 2021, the total number of civilian deaths reached 3,404. In 2014 alone, 2,084 people were killed, following by 955 in 2015. The number dropped significantly in later years, with 112 deaths in 2016, 117 in 2017, 58 in 2018, 27 in 2019, and 26 in 2020, 25 in 2021. Russian propaganda frequently pushes the narrative that Ukraine bombed Donbas for 8 years. However, statistics clearly show that the intensity of the fighting drastically decreased after 2015. A simple comparison of photographs exposed this myth. Donetsk, which Russian media claims was under constant Ukrainian bombardment, remained relatively intact. Meanwhile, Mariupol, which Russia liberated in 2022, was reduced to rubble. In 2018, the Ukrainian parliament approved the amendments to the constitution that would ease the process of joining NATO and the EU. In 2021, the sale of farmland was made easier. By these actions, Ukraine quickly became one of the main exporters of sunflower oil and the fourth largest seller of corn. This was the exact opposite of what Russia wanted. As life around Ukraine was looking bright, aside from the constant fighting on the eastern side of the country, a new chapter was strongly creeping in. The Kremlin never intended to stop at Donetsk and Luhansk. Its goal was always full control over Ukraine, politically and economically, reducing it to a puppet state. On April 5th, 2021, Prime Minister Boris Johnson expressed concerns to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about Russia's recent military activity near Crimea. The following day, on April 6th, 2021, Russia officially announced the commencement of a mass military drills near the Ukrainian border, raising further concerns in Ukraine. And keep in mind, this is almost a year before the full-scale invasion started, so we can have an idea of how early the Russians sent their troops to the Ukrainian border under the disguise of military drills. By April 14th, 2021, 110,000 Russian troops had massed along the border in 56 battalion-sized tactical groups. At the same time, Ukraine held its own military drills in response. NATO foreign and defense ministers also began emergency discussions regarding the build-up of Russian forces near the Ukrainian border. Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu assured on April 22, 2021, that the military drills would soon end and that Russian troops would redeploy by May the 1st, 2021. However, what a surprise, that promise was not fulfilled, as 100,000 Russian troops still remained stationed near the border by May 11th. I have never heard of that before. Russian foreign minister lying? Wow. Surprise, surprise. By the end of 2021, on December 17th, Russia presented a list of their propaganda, which they called security demands. The demands included a legally binding guarantee that Ukraine would never be accepted as a NATO member and that NATO would cease military activity in Eastern Europe, particularly near Ukraine. By the way, one of the parts of the demands was also that NATO would cease all military operations in the Baltics and in Estonia, in my country. No way. In January 2022, a cyber attack hit Ukrainian government websites with a menacing message. By February 18th, so 6 days before the full-scale invasion, US President Biden believed Russia's Vladimir Putin had decided to invade Ukraine. And by that time, I was already making daily videos titled, "When will it happen? How will it happen?" I was sure it's going to happen, and it did. But there were still some people, it's also in Estonia and its Estonian military, who didn't believe it. The UK exposed the plot for a pro-Russian Ukrainian government on January 22nd, while the US put 8,500 troops on alert and NATO reinforced its eastern flank. Russia conducted its largest military exercise since the Cold War with Belarus on February 10th. Finally, on February 21st, 2022, Putin recognized the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, placing Russian troops on standby there. By the way, officially, before Putin came out of the closet with recognizing Donetsk and Luhansk, officially there were no Russian troops. Of course there were, but I remember on 21st of February watching the videos late at night where Russian convoys and columns were driving from Russia into Donetsk and Luhansk openly. Everybody was filming it. I remember covering that. On February 23rd, 2022, Ukraine prepared its population for the potential of war. The Ukrainian parliament approved the state of emergency decree, which would allow authorities impose curfews, restrict movements, block rallies, and ban political parties and organizations. In early hours of February 24th, 2022, President Putin announced a special military operation in Ukraine. President Zelensky responded by declaring a martial law, urging calm and appealing to the Russian people. He then ordered full military mobilization and closed Ukrainian airspace, prohibiting men aged 18 to 60 from leaving the country. By the way, at these very hours this is happening, I did not sleep. I was awake that whole night, live streaming, watching every last photo and video coming out of Ukraine. Everybody was filming it, there was so much footage. Everybody was panicked and scared, so was I, and I put it all up there. I remember it very vividly. This is when it all started for me. On February 25th, Zelensky confirmed multiple Russian missile strikes. Multiple is a small word for it. We're talking hundreds. Russian missile strikes. In response, a wave of international sanctions hit Russia and Council of Europe suspended Russia. Fierce fighting erupted in Kyiv as Russian forces advanced, but Zelensky famously refused US evacuation offer by saying, "I need ammunition, not a ride." I love it, and I loved it at that time. By February 27th, Russia and Ukraine were ready for peace talks, which is so strange now with hindsight that they cannot do peace now because we know what Russia is. They don't want peace, they don't need peace, and they cannot allow peace because they cannot afford it. Only 3 days after the full-scale invasion, Russia and Ukraine were already starting talks. Of course, we all know how they worked out. By March 2022, Russia's defense minister warned Kyiv residents to leave their homes as he planned to strike targets in the Ukrainian capital. The Kremlin's solution was that Ukrainians were only safe in Russia, so they should join them. On March 2nd, the UN voted overwhelmingly for a resolution deploring Russia's invasion of Ukraine and calling for the immediate withdrawal of its forces. The emergency session of the UN's General Assembly saw 141 of the 193 member states voting for the resolution. 35 abstaining and 5 voting against. The 5 countries voting against were Russia, Belarus, North Korea, Eritrea and Syria. Many countries have placed ultimatums on Russia and its leaders. My friends, thank you for making it this far. I hope that this video shed some light on the topic and helped you understand things more clearly. Leave a comment down below if you learned anything from it. If you like my channel, become a monthly member on Buy Me a Coffee and subscribe to my channel. This is part of the members-only videos, members-only group here on YouTube. So if you want to see these videos with early access before anybody else, you get extra videos which are not Ukrainian updates, but these more in-depth analyses. Then click the link in the description, become a member of the channel on YouTube. It's only $1 per month and enjoy this extra content. Until my next video, my friends, Slava Ukraini and bye-bye.